Hello and welcome to Total Telecom TV. I'm Brian Dolby and I'm talking to Rob Bratby of telecoms law firm Olswang. Rob, let's start by actually explaining what a law firm does in telecoms.
Brian, thank you. Telecoms law firms basically help telecoms operators with their legal issues. What does that mean? So if you think about a telecoms operator, they generally need a license to operate, they need spectrum. So we help people get those licenses, we help them trade those licenses, and we help them comply with those licenses. Another thing that the operators do is they buy and sell operations in different jurisdictions. And so we help them buy and sell businesses. We also help them raise money, and occasionally things go wrong, and then we get involved in helping them resolve those disputes.
Now, it's a very dynamic time in telecoms. What are some of the big issues you're dealing with at the moment?
Absolutely. I think it's particularly dynamic here in Asia, where we spend a lot of time. I think one of the big things that we're seeing is the increasing volumes of data. That's really being driven by users that are using their smartphones and their tablets. All of that is putting in a tremendous amount of pressure on operator networks. In turn, that's leading for an increasing demand for spectrum. So we've seen spectrum auctions across the Asia region during the past year, but I think there's going to be a clamour for more and more spectrum to meet this tidal wave of data that's coming through. So we're going to see an increasing number of those spectrum auctions.
For the winners of these auctions, where are the revenues going to come from after that?
Brian, what a good question. It's a question that all of the operators are dealing with, and I think you can break it down into broadly three areas. The first is on the consumer side, where I think a lot of the operators are now looking not only at the traditional services of voice and data, but also increasingly at over-the-top content and over-the-top applications. Now those of course can be a threat as well as an opportunity, but I think the operators are starting to engage with how they really monetize those. The second area is in the enterprise space, where the telcos are moving into enterprise IT, and in particular cloud services, so providing things that they're hosting within their core network to the enterprises. And then the third area is really on the wholesale side, and a trend that we've seen in other parts of the world that's really coming to Asia now is MVNOs, so mobile virtual network operators, so brands coming in to exploit niches and using airtime on mobile operators' networks, and then M2M. The machine-to-machine communication as the proliferation of data continues.
Yeah, I guess as well as we're talking about revenues there, but the way to make revenues really count is to also look at cost management.
Absolutely, and I think it's fair to say there's probably been less of an emphasis on cost in Asia compared to Europe. The trend that we've seen in Europe is for operators to really aggressively attack their cost base. In particular, one thing that we've seen has been network sharing. So a good example of that would be where Vodafone and O2 have shared their radio access network in the UK, and we've seen similar deals across the rest of Europe. We're starting to see that happen across Asia now. It's at a slower pace, and I think there are some concerns, but my prediction is over the next 3 years we're going to see a wave of network sharing deals all across Asia.
In that sort of time frame, what sort of new challenges do you think you'll be facing to help the industry deal with those?
Well, I think the big thing that's going on, and this is not just across telco but more broadly, is big data. I talked about M2M earlier, but as we collect more and more data about what's happening in the world, companies are finding newer and better ways to analyse that, to understand their customers, to understand the customer experience. Now, of course, as you collect all this data, that raises concerns. It's been very topical in the news in terms of how that data has been used and accessed by governments. And I think companies are going to need to tread that balance between using the data to enhance the customer experience, customer stickiness, but also addressing users' concerns about how that data is being used.
Very interesting perspective on the market. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you.